Now, all in all, I think this is a reasonable example of how you can go about starting a bonsai from very, very little. 3 years ago, this elm was a root of another tree. It was a root of this tree. This tree I got from a field grower, and when I got it, I had to cut off lots of roots. I planted them up, and then I let them grow out. And in May of the next year, these had resprouted and it was time to pot them up. In this video, we will follow the roots in the process of 2 years development into this young bonsai. This is now ready to go into a nice pot and enter further refinement. You can see branches like these keep popping up, so it is a video mostly focusing on pruning, letting grow out and pruning again, and repotting 2 or 3 times. At this stage it's really about getting it potted up. As you noticed, I have made a little cut in the root in the hope that side roots will develop. I think the rest of the roots will easily support the tree as it is right now. Let's get this filled up. Now, this year, middle of summer, now I have wired this out in spring, and I was sure I had footage of this, but I can't find it anywhere. I think the dog deleted it. What I'm going to do today, I'm going to look at this trunk. The bark is starting to crack. I think it is partially dead. I'm going to remove the wire, prune it back, wire it out, replant it. Pretty much a full overhaul in the middle of summer. This is not the optimal time to do it, but you know what? It's sitting in the corner. I need to decide, am I going to keep this or am I going to toss it out? Now what you can see here is cracked bark. And cracked bark is never a good story. Not in something as delicate as a cutting. It is still quite fixed, so I'm going to take it out of the pot first, and then I'm going to check what the cracked bark is. Obviously, the root has rooted quite well. Pun intended, yes, yes. So funny. So this is all doing quite well. Healthy roots. And here back you can tell it is not doing so great. Look, this is all, the bark is coming off. It's peeling. There's actually a snail in here. Look at that baby snail. Go play. So yeah, this part of the trunk has completely died, but there's healthy living roots here. So that's all okay. This is a cork bark variety, so I am expecting this to be quite a rough trunk in the end. So I don't think I need to do anything. Actually, this looks like it is new bark. Look at that. There is a thin layer of new bark underneath the old. So it's just shedding the bark that it had created as a root and is now basically working with the new bark. This is really great. So I'm slowly peeling off all these old segments. Now of course I can unwire this tree. If you look carefully, what you'll see here is that all the branches come here from this one junction. I don't need them for a final design. So that cleans up a little bit already. Here in the front there's a few that have popped. There we go. So now I've reduced the tree again to a more realistic number of branches at each spot. It's a little bit windy. I hope the sound comes through okay. So the plant that I originally intended to make was a sort of an informal upright with the main trunk coming out of the soil, nice side roots, a leader, and that be it. And I considered whether I could get any buds on here, but so far that hasn't happened. Now I'm going to first of all reduce this one, because I don't want a lot of extension growth at the moment. I am going to work the roots quite heavily now. So now you can see the shape of the tree a little bit better. I was thinking about reducing this root, but also this one and that one. Now there are not a lot of side roots here on this root, so I need to be a little bit careful. I can clip this one off in the hope that this one re-roots. Look at all the heavy roots that are there, just like that. Now this might resprout roots here at the cut side, right? And basically this one, the same problem. There are hardly any roots here at the base, but I'm still risking it. So now that means that all this has to power the whole tree. In fact, now that I look at it, this would actually make a nice tree as well. Don't you think? If I just plant it up like this and remove that and that afterwards. Now what I could do is could take these roots and let them still go into the ground. Basically plant it like this. Oh, very poor bonsai fashion. I'm just going to chuck it in here. Make sure that all the roots that I do have reach the ground in some place. I already put some substrate in the back so it stays up. Just like that. And then fill it up with substrate. Water it, put it in a corner and hope it doesn't dry out. It's the middle of spring and I've been a little bit slow this year. I forgot to repot this. Now, as said earlier, these two main roots higher up I'm just going to remove. I'm going to assume the rest of the roots have really done something and that these are really no longer needed. Now with these gone, and mind you, you could pot these up and then new foliage might sprout, but I'm not going to. With these gone, I can now look at the rest of the roots, and for that I really need to take it out of the pot. That is healthy roots. I don't want to encourage more roots on the trunk, I want to get more roots down below. So I can now plant it up more vertical in the pot. This of course all needs to go. Also these root stumps, just removing them. I can now plant it up more vertical. All of this is just going to go, leaving only the roots here at the base. I'm just going to plant it up like this. Think of the angle that you want the main trunk to grow later on. That should be about vertical. Now the roots go nicely down into the pot and the trunk has a good angle for potting up. Now not wiring it in is of course not a common practice, and the reason I don't put it in is I just don't want to put any pressure on these roots. That means that this is now going to sit in a windfree spot. I'm probably going to pop it in my greenhouse for the next 2 or 3 weeks, then the roots can establish itself. But first, this branch I don't like sitting here. I think it is too big, so I'm going to reduce some of these branches. Not because I think the roots need it, but because I'm not sure with the final design of this tree. I'm just going to prune it back a little bit. So this will now help keeping these main branches here at the bottom a little bit lighter while I think about the next steps for this tree. It's recovering quite nicely. All I'm going to do is just remove a few of these long runners here in the top, and there's a few branches growing here at the base as well, and they are basically forming side branches here on the trunk, and I don't really want to stimulate any new branches here on the trunk, so I'm just taking those off here as well, keeping it a little bit open. There's lots of buds that form on these branches and I'm just rubbing them off. Now here, some of these I want to extend. This one I don't want to extend because it's the end of the branch, but this one in the middle, it's nice, will fatten up. Here I'm leaving some of this as well. This is the extending branch, which I'm going to keep shorter. This I'm just going to let run to get this a little bit thicker. Yeah, not much more to be done at this point, except for just letting it grow. A few weeks have passed, and what we can see now is that the elm on top has grown really strongly, and the lower branches have grown less. That's one thing we need to remedy. We need to break these down a little bit so that the bottom branches can grow stronger. And at the same time, one thing that we see here is that there's two branches that are pretty much at the same height. Basically as a sort of a weighing scale. Bar branches we call these. And this is something we'd like to avoid, and I'm actually looking at removing one. Now if we look at these branches, we see one here that seems to come from the outside of the curve, which is really nice, but comes up a little bit and then goes horizontal. This one apparently sits on the inside of this curve, but actually has a nice angle. Next to that we see that here is a branch to the left, and there's no other branch to the right all the way in this whole area. So if I were to remove this one, then this whole area would be completely bare. So in this case, even though it's not optimally placed in the inside of the curve, I am going to actually remove the one that sits at a more logical space. Just like that. Then I need to look at the top of the tree. So I follow the trunk line up, and here there's a split. And this is the stronger branch than the one here on the right. However, This one has a nice little curve to it, and this one is a straight continuation. That's also why I am going to remove this one. That way I have a little bit of a curvature here without having to wire it. This is still straight as it can be, so I might at some point have to cut it all the way back to here or even back to here. Then this is a very strong whip and I don't need it. This one I'm going to leave so it can help fatten, but it means that these branches I'm going to reduce significantly. This one I don't want to grow out, neither do I want this one to grow out. Now this top has been contained growth wise, and I can do the same things here, right? So here I'm keeping the branch a little bit longer. This actually is already quite fat. I don't want this fat continuation, so I'm removing it all the way here at the side branch that I have here, leaving one butt in place so it can grow a new side branch. And then this branch, of course, I can give a tiny little wire just to hold it down a little bit. And this is 1.5 millimeters of aluminium, which is more than strong enough for a young branch like this. And it doesn't have to have lots and lots of coils, right? This is really just holding it in place for the next couple of weeks, and then it is set at this angle. And that's all the work for now. This can now go back into the garden again and grow for another couple of weeks. Late August, and what you can see here, the area where initially I thought the bark was dead and it was just a rotting bark, has completely barked over. Yeah, this is doing really well. The pruning has really caused the lower part of the tree to get a lot fuller. And yeah, this big long sacrifice I can leave in place for another year or 2 years, aiding very much in fattening this part up. Meanwhile, I need to keep the top pruned down. The little wire that I put in here can also go, because it's done its job. It has put the attachment at a more horizontal angle. Let's see where I can get this off without damaging the tree. There we go. Now all that we have left here is this old stump where it was cut off. And let's try, I have an old blunt concave cutter here, and with this concave cutter you can quite easily take off pieces of wood quite deep in the trunk. Now this wood has already gone soft, so it comes off very easily. And just by removing these sort of stumps, what I'll do is aid this area here above it to grow over the dead section. This will take a year or two, and actually this concave cutter is a little bit big. But at a certain point you'll touch here on the live edge, and tickling the live edge like this will aid in this callousing more, and that will then start growing over the bark, over the dead wood section. Now all in all, I think this is a reasonable example of how you can go about starting a bonsai from very, very little. These I keep pruned on top quite religiously, because that way the lower branches are encouraged to grow more. Also, the branches here on top now stay a little bit finer growth. And as said, this sacrifice I can let grow, or I can decide now already, no, I'm going to clip it off, for instance, here, and take this as my new next top. Or I can say, no, I'm going to go much deeper, I'm going to go all the way here, because this is a straight section and I don't like it. And I'm going to build the canopy from this part, or even lower or lower. These are personal choices. There is no, per definition, right and wrong. What's important to keep in mind is that if the base is quite thin, your tree can't be too big, otherwise it will just look like a long plant. This will fatten up the whole trunk down, so eventually this will just become as big as here. The bottom of the trunk won't fatten up as quickly as the top, percentage-wise. And yeah, besides that, it's all in your own hands. How big a trunk do you want? How much top growth do you need? If you want a wound that sits here in the base to close, a sacrifice branch will enormously aid in closing over, so that's a good reason for letting this run. But you could also do that from one or two of the lowest branches. You can also allow sacrifice branches to grow to aid in closing this over. I'm going to leave this tree. I'm going to leave this video. I'm going to decide, this is a nice height. And yeah, this is an example of how you can make a nice little starter bonsai. In this case from a root cutting to be honest. And yeah, the root base. You want to have a look at the roots? Let's take a quick peek at the roots. I'm not sure whether we are going to see any fresh roots here. Most of the roots are probably going to be down below. Yeah. Now I'm going to do something which you shouldn't do at home, but this is for the example, right? Let's take a look at the roots and see what has happened below the soil. This normally you would try to avoid doing in the growing season, as it just reduces top growth. But I want you to see how the roots have developed over the season. Look at that, this is just a complete flat root ball now. Lots and lots of fine roots everywhere. Here there's actually new roots at the base, I don't want it. But yeah, this is the sort of root development that you can expect from an elm in one growing season. Look at that, all these fine root hairs everywhere. So removing the bigger roots has now resulted in lots and lots of fine roots popping up everywhere where there's soil. I'm taking all of these off here at the base because I really want the nebari to start developing. And here's the first roots of the nebari. Look. Well, this was Jelle, growing bonsai and growing out a root cutting for a cork bark elm into a young pre-bonsai tree. Ready to leave me? Off to you.